My childhood friend was my first love. I used to run around the backyard with Lily all the time. She fell spectacularly one day. I gasped in astonishment at such a sight. She questioned, her cheeks flushed crimson red. "Did you see?" "My name is Jack. Although my parents no longer live here, I will always have a warm spot for the name they gave me. In my early years, my mother got married again. I have no recollections of my biological father. My mother's second husband was the only father I knew. He was a really kind guy. He was my biological father, I always believed. He became ill after a violent cold snap when I was in elementary school and died suddenly. I believe my mother suffered a great deal as a result of his passing because she was such a big fan of him. Not long after his death, my mother's health deteriorated and she too passed suddenly. I was on my own. When I was in elementary school, I discovered that sadness could really kill a person. My paternal grandma Bella Barnett was the one who took me in when I was abandoned. She was the one, I was told, who had fought against my parents' union all the way through. My grandma and I were the only surviving relatives after my grandfather had already passed away. However, I am not a blood relative of my grandma. Even though we are not blood cousins, the fact that we are the only Barnett family members left endures. My grandma took over my grandfather's company and continues to work there now. She is the epitome of the matriarch. Even mature men bow down before her when she gets going because of her intense fervor despite her seeming frailty. When I was a kid, it was really horrifying. I was just afraid when I learned that I would be living with such a grandmother. Up to the day I had to move in with such a terrifying individual, I can still remember crying every day. I'm 25 years old now. Despite her concern, my grandmother raised me in a really admirable way. There was a strange feeling when we initially moved in together, since neither of us understood how to talk to the other. I assumed that Lily, the daughter of the gardener who worked at my grandmother's house, served as our intermediary. Lily was a newborn when she was originally taken in by my grandma, and her father had her out in the garden when she was dumped on our porch. It seems that her father was raising Lily alone after his wife left him, and my grandmother had allowed him to take Lily to work. My grandma and I couldn't get along for 3 years, and I never felt comfortable coming home. The young infant was sleeping on a mattress that was spread out on the porch when I arrived home from school one day. She smiled broadly at me as I peered over. I gave her a gentle prod on the cheek because her face was so cute. I was shocked when she began sobbing loudly all of a sudden. That's when my granny arrived. "Jack, welcome home." Oh no, it appears that she is not feeling well. My grandmother picked up the wailing baby and started to comfort her. I think my expression expressed my amazement upon seeing my grandmother for the first time. The infant seemed to be having fun as it swung softly in my grandmother's arms and burst out laughing. "Grandma, can you do magic?" I inquired. My grandmother looked at me a little confused, but then grinned and answered, "Yes, I can." "Can Grandma's magic make my chest feel better too?" I remarked, glancing at the giggling infant, that my chest hurt and felt chilly all the time. It had been that way since I lost my parents. I wanted my grandmother's magic to make me giggle like this baby, if she could do that. At the time, I was a little immature compared to my peers. My grandma put her hand softly on my chest and whispered, "It's a secret," in response to what I had stated. A peculiar perfume blended with the smell of my grandmother's burning incense and newborn milk when she got close. My chest warmed as my grandmother caressed me tenderly. The feeling of being choked that had constantly been in my chest vanished like crazy after that. It's incredible. That no longer hurts, I told my grandmother with excitement. I can vividly picture my granny laughing while wearing a rather worried expression. The peculiar disconnect that had existed between my grandmother and myself disappeared that day. I'm 5 years older than Lily. Lily was in elementary school when I started middle school. My grandmother's garden allowed Lily to come and go, so we immediately became good friends. We were in similar situations, missing our moms, and we had a closer bond than my school pals. I had always watched Lily grow up, since I had known her since she was a baby. The boys in her immediate vicinity started to act differently as she advanced through the elementary school years. Lily had developed into a lovely, sophisticated young woman in some way. Her father was a head gardener and used to be really concerned about her. On her way home from school, she was once accosted by someone who seemed suspicious. She hurried into our garden while wearing a horrified appearance. Lily could not bear that side of herself. That's when she stopped wearing skirts and cut her hair short, as I recall. Following my graduation from college, I lived with my grandma for a year while I was jobless. Her health was deteriorating as she grew older. I had begun to notice a downturn in her health during my sophomore year of high school. I was choosing which college to attend at the time. I decided to enroll in the nearest, lowest-ranked university from my hometown after my grandma gave me the freedom to do as I pleased. My class advisor attempted to get me to pursue a more esteemed university, but I had no plans to move away from my grandmother. Naturally, I was accepted to the university. I took care of my grandmother for a year following my graduation. After her health had stabilized, I went job seeking and was able to find work. I chose to work at a large advertising agency in my hometown because I had no intention of moving elsewhere. The 1 year difference shouldn't really matter, I thought. Though the world isn't that pleasant, I thought so. On the day of the job offer ceremony, this was brutally brought to my attention. Aside from me, there were 5 other new recruits. They were all elites who had graduated from prominent colleges and seemed to take great satisfaction in that fact. Mr. Baker, a recent graduate of a top university, was in charge of training us new recruits. I was astonished to see him blatantly prefer the junior staff who had graduated from the same university as him. As a recent graduate of a lowly university, I was treated as if I were inhuman. Since the pre-joining orientation, things have been this way, and I'm becoming sick and tired of it every day. Oh, he looks so fed up again today, my grandmother, who had regained some of her vitality, said while sitting on a rocking chair in a room with a view of the garden, knitting something. The strength in her eyes had not diminished, despite her aging and fragility. I've come to understand that life may be quite difficult. I joke about with my grandmother about Mr. Baker. My grandmother gave my anecdote a hearty laugh. Whoa, it's amazing that a man with his level of tradition is still alive. Ah well, it's Lily back after a lengthy absence. In an instant, hearing Lily's name lifted my heavy heart. Lily should be turning 20 this year, but I haven't seen her since she finished junior high. Our only communication has been via correspondence. Evidently, when Lily was about to graduate from junior high school, she had discussed her future plans with my grandma. Lily was adamant that she could pursue her passion without going to high school. Naturally, Mr. Depp, her father, was adamantly against it. He was adamant that she attend high school, which caused disagreements practically every evening. When I got home from school one day, I saw Mr. Depp and my grandmother seated side by side in the living room. My grandmother beckoned me over as soon as she saw me. I sat down across from my granny. Lily appeared really solemn, and Mr. Depp appeared concerned. I knew right away that this had to do with her future intentions. Dad, I get where you're coming from. Lily was the first to break the silence. I understand the value of high school, but I don't need it. Mr. Depp remarked, sounding disturbed. Even so, you must understand the difficulties you'll face in the real world without at least a high school diploma. He didn't seem to be angry at all. I want to be a horse worker. I wish to develop into a steady hand. I have to train at a ranch for that. My dreams don't deserve me to go off course. Compared to the main leagues, local horse racing offers better career paths for civil servants. However, real-world experience is still required. Maybe I could have an advantage by starting early than others. Lily was sincerely attempting to persuade her father that enjoying high school life at the expense of pursuing her true passions would be a waste. This is the side of Lily that I've always appreciated. She is quite direct and doesn't hesitate at all. She has frequently supported me while I've been struggling. Lily has a point, Mr. Depp. High school life offers many benefits, but what if those benefits don't meet her needs? Isn't that something Lily has to decide? I stated. My remark appeared to have Mr. Depp gasping for air. I believe he was speechless. I concur with you. I believe Mr. Depp's only concern is Lily. Can you then leave Lily's future in my hands? I swear, I'll locate a suitable training facility. My grandma said to Mr. Depp, let's observe the youth's journey together. My grandmother has always had a strong voice, in my opinion. It's challenging to refute. Ultimately, Mr. Depp gave in, and shortly after Lily's middle school graduation, she departed for an Alaskan ranch. Since then, it has been a while since we last saw one another. Lily has just returned from Alaska. I was a little miffed that she didn't get back to me. She claimed that since you were preoccupied with your new job, she didn't want to bother you. Seeing her well and content would be preferable to us, not meeting out of consideration. I really thought there was an orientation the following day before I started my new job. I felt disgusted since early in the morning while I was making my way to the firm. Mr. Depp had already begun trimming the garden's plants. I was somewhat relaxed by the aroma of the plants. The sound of the snipping reverberated in the refreshingly calm air. Since I still had some time, I spent it quietly observing Mr. Depp at work. He's becoming a little older and more dignified. It seems that he intends to hire a few trainees in the upcoming year. Being a craftsman himself, I believe Mr. Depp must have known Lily's emotions better than anyone. I finally started to notice stuff like these as I grew older. Master AEL, is today your company's entrance ceremony? Mr. Depp looked up from his job and saw me staring. I'm 25 years old, and he still calls me Master AEL. It's kind of consoling, but it also feels a little strange. In actuality, this is merely orientation. This is training in preparation for entering the organization. I scratched my head and muttered, there's a lot to learn, to which Mr. Depp laughed heartily. Well, this is only the start, is it not? Continue as you are. Encouraged by Mr. Depp's support, I was able to start. I waved him off, then made my way to the office. It was obvious that I was the outsider as soon as I got to work. It became a big deal that a guy like me, who went to a low-tier college and had been jobless for a while, was hired. Mr. Baker was talking loudly to the other newcomers about my history. It's as if he has no idea what personal privacy is, because he continued the talk despite knowing that I had entered the room. He looked me in the eyes and concluded, I must have some big connections. Being referred to as Mr. Bottom to University all day irritates me, though I try not to let it get to me. After graduating, what did you do? I take it that Mr. Bottom to University is unemployed. Did you belong to the NEET? Mr. Baker never stops making fun of me, and I'm sick of it. It's challenging to learn the crucial training material when you have to listen to him brag about how hard he worked to get into this organization and about his college adventures. Of course, the bullying didn't end there. I was the only one who didn't receive any paperwork or updates from the conference room on room changes. It resembled the kind of elementary school bullying. I was so amused by it that I thought about quitting midway. This might go on forever if this is what it's like to work here. Merely thinking about it depletes all my energy. I can only hope that I'm allocated to a department that is as far away from Mr. Baker as feasible. However, Mr. Baker is not the only issue. The culture of the entire organization is similar to Mr. Baker's. This is a place where it's normal to criticize someone based solely on their educational background, even though he may be an exceptional case. I sensed this general trend quite strongly. Lily was cleaning the yard when I got home from a gloomy training day. For a minute, I couldn't even say hello to her. "Oh, Jack, it's been a while," Lily said as she swung a bamboo broom in greeting. Her waist looked abnormally large. "I made a mistake. I'm receiving treatment at home." She looked up at me, then quickly raised the hem of her shirt. There was a white cast underneath. She apparently fell off a horse while being trained. During her leave, she has returned home to recuperate. There is a lot of heavy lifting involved in working at the stable. The owner of the property informed her that taking good care of her back is essential. I can't help but think about our early days spent playing in the garden as I watch Lily with a bamboo broom in her hands. And Lily was my first love. I remembered Lily falling dramatically in the yard one day. "Did you see me?" Lily timidly said after she had fallen. My first instinct was to say, yes. She wouldn't talk to me for a week after that day. That was difficult, I recall. She recognized immediately when I lost myself in the past and asked, "Are you reminded of something silly now?" Terrifying me, she raises the bamboo broom. No, not at all. With a broom in hand, Lily begins pursuing me. Fearful, I bolt without thinking. As we rushed about the yard, my grandma could be heard laughing loudly from the porch. "Doesn't running so much hurt you?" Breathless from not exercising enough. Lily continues to calmly chase after me. It hurts, of course. I'm relishing the suffering. It appears that she is going through pain in order to learn from her error. It struck me as a rather firm remark. It's the path I chose. This pain is nothing. After a while, Lily triumphantly climbed onto my back, and I was easily grabbed. My outfit was getting soiled, but it didn't matter to her. Lily gave me a congrats on my back. It was the day of the entrance ceremony, and I had finished my pre-employment training. I was still not sure that joining that company was the proper move. Even though I was still unsure, I dressed in my suit, fastened my necktie, and walked through the front entrance to the company. Whether I like it or not, if I continue to accumulate days like these, my current predicament may eventually be laughed at. Thinking that way seems like self-deception to me. Often, bad instincts are accurate. At the admission ceremony, there was an incident. It took place right before the ceremony began. Mr. Baker began to play about with me in front of the outside guests, as usual. Out loud, he referred to me as the bottom to university guy. It's unexpected that you were able to attend the opening ceremony. People at universities with FF rankings are incredibly resilient. Mr. Baker purposefully shouted loudly enough for the guests to hear that I attend a university on the lower end of the scale. I attempted to dismiss him with a fake smile. "How did you go about getting a job?" Isn't it preferable to express it honestly? Mr. Baker seemed to take pleasure in making fun of me in front of everyone. His constant criticism of me is really getting on my nerves. There was some agitation among the guests, perhaps in response to the term nepotism. "I'd really like to see the face of your parents who got you in here using connections," hissed Mr. Baker. I heard Mr. Baker say it with triumph, but he got no response from me. "You want to see his parents?" I held him up, and a firm voice rang through the hallway. My grandmother was sitting in a wheelchair, wearing a suit with a guest ribbon pinned to her chest, when I swiftly turned to face the voice. I moved the wheelchair in closer proximity to Mr. Baker. The wheelchair was being pushed by Lily. When my grandma suddenly appeared, Mr. Baker was shocked. The CEOs rustled just as my grandmother stepped forward. I brought him up. "Do you find that offensive?" Anger entered my grandmother's eyes. Mr. Baker struggled to express her authority. He was blatantly mocking me only a moment earlier. He now resembled a frog under a snake's intense gaze. Now what to do after my grandmother said it? Glancing over to the executive seats, they were stunned by her presence. This company serves her company as a client. The company that my grandma owns is involved in the majority of the agreements. It appears that my grandma was asked to address the new hires with a congrats. The execs were obviously aware of me. They had even admitted to me in the interview that nepotism was the reason I wasn't hired. When Mr. Baker saw the executives becoming angry, it appeared that he had recognized his error. Isn't this company's standard of decency too low? Nobody ceased the demeaning behavior. This, in my opinion, disqualifies it from being AEL's workplace and a commercial partner. Chairman, what are your thoughts on that? Said Lily. After Lily's remarks, my grandmother gave a hesitant nod. She turned to face me then and said, "Let's go home." AEL. It felt strangely rejuvenated. I have no desire to work for this company. I've stirred things up. Please carry on with the ceremony. My grandson will accompany me. On the contracts, we'll get in touch with you, my grandmother remarked. The executives spoke up. Wait, please. My grandma didn't seem to notice the uproar when Mr. Baker was being yelled at to apologize. My grandmother calmly said, "Let's go home." I faced my grandmother once more when I got home. She admitted to me that she had been concerned that I would arrive at work each day with a sad expression. "Jack, don't you have something you really want to do? To be honest, I was taken aback when you selected that business." My grandma stammered when speaking. I think she sees right through everything. That is the company I choose for my granny. You're too considerate. Live more freely, she said, her understanding evident in her tone. My grandma would be pleased that I had selected my place of employment. Taking a deep breath, I resolved myself. I lowered myself so much that my forehead touched the ground. Please allow me to work as Mr. Depp's landscaping trainee. Mr. Depp has always struck me as having a craftsman's manner. Having lost my father when I was young, Mr. Depp was the adult role model I looked up to. I uttered the words that had been lodged in my chest. I want to live as an artisan. It was as if I were breathing new life into my own self. I said to myself, I'm sorry for holding it in all this time. I then formally started working as Mr. Depp's apprentice. Even though I was now an apprentice, it was a little awkward to be called Master AEL. However, the landscaping training was uncompromising and rigorous. Every day, I felt desperate to stay awake while being taught to master the craft, but each day was immensely satisfying. Lily returned to her property in Alaska following her recuperation. She informed me that she will be employed as a stable hand at a nearby racecourse beginning in the next year. I was in no position to fall short against Lily, who was consistently realizing her goals. I would occasionally hear her tease me, "Jack, you're just a late bloomer." Who would gain independence first? It had an air of rivalry. Despite the distance between us, I felt more connected to Lily than before. I developed to the point where I was referred to as Mr. Depp's right-hand man after a few years. I had made up my mind long ago to ask Lily to marry me as soon as I was independent. I told her that today. To be honest, I was expecting her to say yes immediately, but she said, "Wait." Lily had begun her career as an employee of the state. I painfully realized what her wait meant. I said right away, "I'll wait as long as it takes." A stupid relationship where one of us needs to put up with anything is not what I desire. We can wait for each other indefinitely if we show each other respect and concern. That is beyond dispute.